everyone. This is Darren from Team Advent Reverse. Here we have our first place buy card winner from CNC in California, Bailey.
Hello, that's me. I'm Bailey from Team Advent Reverse. Here's my standard deck profile. Prison, gray, best color in standard. Got me the buy card. Ride line, very solid. I want to match the theme with the starter. Prison 1, 2, 3, and the prison itself. 4 Pure Lights. Best card in the deck. This is why the deck is so good. On place, you pay costs, you grab up to 6 cards and put them in prison, and your front row is going to get +5 for every 2 cards in your prison. That's up to 15k on the front row. Turn 4. This card is insanely solid. It's great. It's great.
Throughout the whole day, have you hit any inconsistencies where you just did not get the grade 4 in any of your turns?
No, thankfully I'm better than all of my opponents, and I hit the win cons every game, including OT, but we'll save that for later.
Perfect.
There are no more grade 3s in the deck. The 1 Seraph Snow is all we need, just because we hit the Pure Lights every game. So we just run turquoise, 4 turquoise. This card deters opponents from freeing cards from prison, as it gives them a -5k when they do, and then she gets a +5k on my turn while I have cards in prison. This card is crazy good. It's a huge deterrent from them freeing cards. If they have a trigger, they're not going to free it because it's a 0k. Especially if I have 2 on board, they don't want to pay costs. They don't want to pay Counterblast and Soul Blast to call out cards that are going to be at most 3k base.
Did you ever see your opponents like molding to realize that when they called their units pieces that they needed the most, that it was just going to be so like what's the word, like watered down?
There was one game in particular, it was my second round, where this card had made their columns turn into, I think, 10Ks and 13Ks, so they had to swing into my rears, and I mean, their big turn 4 pressure turn ended up being just 2 Brigard swings, then a Vanguard, which was like 2 card guardable, so this card definitely turns games around. It's a huge tempo swing.
Cool.
I'm going to do these 2 cards at the same time because they serve the same purpose. It's 4 Macarite and 4 Cuff Spring. They both do the same. They have the same purpose, and that is getting 1 card into prison. Macarite's from the top card of their deck, while Cuff Spring grabs a card from their hand, but they redraw a card. Macarite is better. It has a cost of a Soul Blast. It doesn't really matter because your prison sets you up with 3 extra soul. Your soul costs are pretty much covered for the entire game. This grabs the top card. You can grab cards that they don't want to be in prison, like their triggers, their PGs, orders if they have any. While this card, it lets them pick their worst card in their hand, throw it into prison, and replace it with a hopefully better card. Or they can put in a card that they want to call anyways, so they get a pseudo +1 for paying a Soul Blast.
Cool. So like your overall rating of when you do prison a trigger from the top of the deck, or there's whatever reason they throw a trigger or an order from their hand into the prison, how often did you witness them like trying to get it out rather than like just having it leaving it in the prison the whole game?
I believe I've called Cuff Spring once in the entire tournament. Every time I had the opportunity to have any other grade 2 or grade 1 even replace this card, I would throw this card away for PGs. I throw it away for Ride deck. I would not play this card if I had a choice. Macarite, I grabbed a trigger or a PG nearly every time, and then that's a card that it's a trigger out of their deck or a PG, and it's one that they won't be hitting defensive. It's 1 card that stays in prison, because why would you want to free a 5k or a 6k if it's just going to go right back into prison and serve no purpose?
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. 2 Aggro Rogue finishes out the grade 2s. On place, Soul Blast, and Prison a front row. It's a little restrictive with the front row. The skill doesn't actually resolve a whole lot, I've noticed. Usually with Pure Lights, they get to pick, so they'll pick front rows, so that way you cannot grab them off of Aggro Rogue. But as long as they have cards in prison, which is very common late game, 2 or more, she's a 15k shield and a 15k body constantly. So it prevents like 13k regards or 10k regards swinging into her late game if they have no booster. 15k shields, another trigger, boost up the defense of the deck. All around solid card.
Cool. Do you see yourself bumping this card up compared to the Cuff Springs?
Yes, this card needs to go. This card's going down in 1 for sure. Aggro Rogue's going up to 3. This card is it really is a guaranteed way to put a card into prison. If you need to hit that, if you're at 9, you need to hit that 10th card. Cuff Spring does okay. I'm personally not a fan, but I think 3 Cuff Spring and 3 Aggro Rogue is probably a little bit better.
Cool.
Grade 1s, it's PGs. I don't need to say anything else there. We cannot play the order as we are a grade 4 deck. If we are not on grade 4, we're losing the game anyways. The order wouldn't help. So we run 4 of these.
Perfect. Okay.
I'm going to go with these first. 4 Shovel Studs. This card, I think, is a prison staple. Counter Blast, Soul Blast. You choose one of their rearguards and put it in prison, and if there are 3 or more, you draw a card. So even if they have nothing on board, if you need that extra draw, hopefully you need another attacker, or if you want to get a Pure Light for the next turn if you don't have one already. This card digs you 1 card deeper for a Counter Blast and Soul Blast. The Soul Blast is nothing. The Counter Blast is a little tight late game, but it's absolutely worth it, especially if you're actually throwing a card in the prison.
Okay.
The last grade 1, Suppressed Gleamer. I think this card is crazy. I was very fortunate that I opened up one every game, and I was always able to resolve the skill. On place from hand, if your opponent has 3 in prison, you grab another card from your deck, another copy. And she's a 13k body constantly as long as you are on a Seraph, which is good. You won't hit 3 before you hit Seraph anyways. There have been a bunch of games. These are 13k boosters. They pressure early behind a Seraph on turn 3, where I have 3 cards in prison. It's a 36k column to a 10 or a 13 even. It's really impactful. Even if you have it on a side column, you push it up. It's a 13k attacker in late game. It's also 13k body. They can't swing into it with 10ks. This card all around crazy. It thins a card out of the deck. Probably most importantly, helps you see those triggers more often.
Would you say by far it's your favorite tech card that you've actually held and put into the tournament scene?
This is my favorite card in the deck, probably. Besides Macarite grabbing triggers, that's funny. But this card, I think I can't see myself playing the deck without this card. The space in this deck is fairly limited. I think the only real slots that you have to play around with are Suppressed Gleamers, are these 3 slots. You can throw in an extra Seraph Snow to make sure you hit Persona Rides and you're applying pressure constantly. You can throw in more Aggro Rogues as opposed to taking out Cuff Springs for them. You can play in the defensive orders if you feel that you need more defensive cards. But I think that thinning cards out of the deck, having good bodies, I think this is the better card, in my opinion.
Cool. Okay.
For triggers, 3 vanilla crit, 4 effect crit. So it's 7 crit and 4 draw. I personally prefer the 4 draw 7 crit to the 8-3 because this deck is slightly more piece reliant. You need Pure Lights to be able to do things. I like seeing the Shovel Studs, which draw me more cards, the Suppressed Gleamers, which filter out other cards. I'd rather draw a piece, and I feel like the crit isn't as necessary, especially when you're hitting 10 in prison. The extra crit generally is kind of overkill.
Okay.
The last couple cards. I run 2 effect heal. This is the counter heal that stops multi-attackers. And I play 2 regular heal. I knew that going into this event, I was a little bit more scared of Flagberg matchups and possible Nirvana matchups, as opposed to things like a Gravidia or a Mirror match. So I wanted to be able to tech accordingly, and I had these on hand, so I threw them in. I don't think these actually played a role either way. They weren't positive or negative. I never missed the 5k shield. I never actually resolved the 10k shield, but in theory, I think this was way better.
With the whole debate of the heal triggers going on, whether you should play the vanilla or the restander or the crit, how do you feel about this whole debacle?
You should absolutely play counter heals if you are worried of a particular matchup. If you know that your worst matchup is something like Nirvana, where you'll have a restanding big guy and you'll need some defenses against that, or Overlord, where their Vanguard restands, you want to be able to 1-card block accordingly, and this is the card then you want to play these heals on like its power for multi-attackers. If you know that Gravidia is probably a worse matchup, or I guess Barrow Magnus, or Prison, you'd want to play that. If you don't have a certain matchup that you hate, I think playing 4 vanillas, right? If you're going into a locals and you know one's going to be more popular, I would definitely tech for it.
Cool. Okay. And the last card.
Last card's that over trigger. I think Gray has the best over trigger. Doubles the power and crit of your front row. It's insane if it's active. While you have 10 cards in prison with Pure Light, you have 4 crit on the front row. I think the Gray over trigger is just the best over trigger. There's no reason to play the generic over trigger over this one.
So overall, with the whole tournament that whole day, how often did you better player your opponent?
I resolved this card in a couple games. In 2 of the games that it was resolved, it was on drive checks. It was on my final drive check, but they were already dead. They already no-guarded the attack. It didn't matter, but I think I resolved this once defensively in my 3rd round just to save an extra damage going through. So I resolved it in most games, meaningful ways, none.
Cool. And then would you like to give any special shout outs to anybody out there?
My boys on Team Advent Reverse, specifically Panda. Everyone else on the team isn't as good. Didn't get top 4. Panda for life.
Well, that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you so much.